actually call a mobility break. Ang mobility break, at natuklasan ko lang yun ng isang araw, is the break where imbis na kainan, tatayo at magbabanat ng buto, magsi-stretching ng konti. Okay, di ba? And you can also use that break to go to the restroom or do whatever you want to do. As I said, again, nobody's prevented from standing up anytime, but I just wanted to put that in their mobility break. Okay, so formally, I need to tell you that Rule 10, Section 13, Subsection 5 of the Rules of the Senate provide that the Committee on Ways and Means has jurisdiction on all matters related to revenue, generally taxes and fees, tariffs, loans, and other sources and forms of revenue. I would like to place on record that we have already manifested the Vice Chairperson, who is Senator Sonny Angara, and the members in the last session. So on record na po yan. So kung maglalabi kayo, huwag kayo dun pumunta, dito na lang kayo pumunta. As in the previous Congresses, the committee will simply adopt the pertinent provisions of Rule 10 and Rule 11 of the Rules of the Senate, as well as Resolution Number 5, or the Rules of Procedure governing inquiries in aid of legislation, as the rules of the committee. And thus, we would like to welcome a motion for Senator Bato in that direction.
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the pertinent rules of the Senate on Rules 10 and 11, as well as Resolution Number 5 of the Rules of Procedure governing inquiries in aid of legislation, as the rules of the committee.
The chair hears no objections because there is no other member here. The pertinent rules of the Senate, as mentioned, and the resolution number 5 governing inquiries in aid of legislation are hereby adopted. We also adopt the 17th Congress rules of the Committee on Ways and Means, subject to, I'd like to reiterate, gender-sensitive language and style. I think you all know that that is important, not just to me, but we need to be examples to everyone listening to us. So, sa committee ko, for those who have attended in the last 12 years, it's not in my script, but I always remind those. I usually prefer that you don't read your position paper to me. I always say that marunong naman po kami magbasa, so we can read it on our own. I prefer that you summarize the salient points. But I know this is technical, and Yusek Carl is very animated in his presentation, so that warning is not directed to you. Kasi pag nakatulog si Senator Bato, hindi ko nakasalanan yun, di ba? Kasi technical talaga to eh. So kindly naman put some life into your explanation and just don't read it to us. Kasi I will really say, submit nyo na lang yun. Kung babasahan nyo lang naman kami. I can also call the mobility break at magbabasa kami kung yun lang naman ang gagawin natin na magbabasahan, di ba? And you're always welcome to have a presentation due to constraints in time. But in this hearing, I will try to be very liberal with time because, again, it's very technical. But as I said, in these hearings, in this committee, we'll try to, if not necessarily extend the time because I want to value everybody's time. Normally, they will be 2 to 3 hour hearings only, so that people can digest everything, and then we will have more continuous hearings. This particular hearing is an overview. The floor will generally be directed at Yusek Chua, tama? And I leave it up to you because there's just General Bato and myself. If we have questions, if you want to call on your colleagues and other departments to clarify anything, it's freewheeling. I'm just a little bit stricter when there are more senators, or if they start trickling in, then I'll have to moderate it a little bit more carefully. But otherwise, freewheeling lang naman tayo. Anything else? Anything else? General Bato, Senator Bato, any comments, or we're ready to listen? Okay, we're ready to listen. So on that note, welcome everybody. I won't introduce all of you except my schoolmate, Yusek Barba. That's the only reason why he gets a special introduction. But welcome everybody. I already, of course, mentioned that Yusek Chua will be presenting, and whoever else he needs to call to enlighten us. I'm also assuming that there are representatives of the different senators' offices here today. So I like to put on record that the Department of Finance is more than ready to also present to your principals, so that I'm sure you'll be reporting to them, and I'm sure we all have different concerns. So the individual presentations are, I personally recommend the individual presentations, and the department is at your disposal, as I've previously discussed with the department. So, on that note, let's proceed. Yusek Chua, the floor is yours. May I also request if we can make the aircon stronger kasi medyo marami. Alam niyo, nag-hearing ako sa health at saka sa women's. Siguro mga 1/100 lang ang tao dito. Kaya ngayon lang ako nainitan. Kasi normally nag-hearing ako, padalawa-dalawa lang yung nag-a-attend. Ngayon, siguro nagagalingan kayo kay Yusek Chua o kaya gusto nyo makita in action si Senator Bato. Kasi ngayon lang ako nagkaroon ng ganito karaming tao sa hearing ko. Well, except for reproductive health. Okay, let's proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Senator Bato, Senator Cayetano, and fellow stakeholders in government and the private sector. Today, I have 3 presentations. The first will be an overview of the Duterte administration's reform agenda so that everyone can see the big picture, why we need to do the tax reform and where the country is headed. The second presentation will be an update on Package 1, or the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion, or TRAIN law, to be given by myself and Yusek Antoinette Yonko, who heads the Revenue Operations Group of the Department of Finance. And the third presentation will be an overview of the remaining packages of the Comprehensive Tax Reform Program. Madam Chair, at any time, let me know if you have questions, or Senator Bato, so I can pause so that everyone can understand better. So
At some point, you can just incorporate and update us
Sure.
with what's going on in the House, although I obviously have a direct line to the Speaker.
Yes.
But I did not attend their hearing.
Okay,
So,
I will-
and you did, and
Okay.
and there were also updates on the version that was passed on second reading, right?
Correct,
So
ma'am.
at least you can also update us on that. Thank
Thank
you.
you. When I present the tax reform, I will give a more detailed update. Let me begin with the story of the Philippines, which is a transformation from stability to prosperity. The reason why I use this title is because for 7 decades, from independence to around 2005, we have been in a stabilization mode. What that means is our country has been in and out of some crisis, fiscal deficit, balance of payment crisis, coup d'etats, and we were not able to think long term. All our policies from those 7 decades were about keeping the country afloat. But since important reforms in the 2000, we are able to sustain quality growth, and for the first time, we are thinking about the long term. That is why we are moving from stability to prosperity. And the vision of the Duterte administration is basically to reduce poverty from 21.6, last recorded in 2015, to 14% by 2022. That means 6 million Filipinos will be lifted out of poverty. And the poverty line around this time is around 60 pesos per person per day. And that is a tall order, but achievable because of the reforms we're doing. Then by 2022, we would like the Philippines to graduate from low middle income to upper middle income country, like China, Thailand, and Indonesia today. So that would mean the Philippines becoming an upper middle class country in the world income distribution. By 2040, NEDA's ambisyon natin has put a target of 0 extreme poverty and to become a high-income country like South Korea and Japan. So that is the vision. And how do we achieve this vision? Our president proposed a 10-point socio-economic agenda in the beginning of his term. Just to recap, the first one is to sustain macroeconomic policies. The second is to do tax reform. The third is to ease doing business. The fourth is to spend more on infrastructure. The fifth is rural development. The sixth is land management. Seventh is human capital development. 8 is science and arts. 9 is social protection program. And 10 is reproductive health law, all to be improved. And whenever you see a green, that means those have been achieved in the first 3 years of the administration. The ones in yellow are ongoing, and we hope to achieve them in the next 3 years. Let me now give you the salient provisions or achievements, rather, on each of the green ones. The first is macroeconomic policy sustained. In 2005, World Bank did a survey asking investors why they don't come to the Philippines, and the number one problem was macroeconomic instability. And in 2017, you will notice that World Economic Forum survey does not already see any macroeconomic instability as the main issue. In other words, we have addressed the 7-decade problem that we have seen that kept our economy in a very weak state before. The people and the investors today are concerned about the inefficiency of the bureaucracy, the inadequacy of infrastructure, and corruption. All of these are being addressed in the 10-point socioeconomic agenda. Some of the indicators that I will present here show the transformation more clearly. For instance, economic growth. In the 90s, the blue bar shows that we averaged only 2.8% GDP growth. The green bar, which is the last decade, the 2010 decade, we are seeing 6.3% GDP growth. So this is almost a tripling of our economic growth potential. The second is GDP per capita, which is the entire GDP or economic pie divided by the total population. And you will see from 3,898, we have almost doubled that to 6,487, meaning the average Filipino today is twice as rich compared to 2 decades ago. But of course, there is inequality that we want to address. The third is inflation in the 90s was 9.7% on average. And so long as it did not exceed 10%, at that time, it was acceptable. Today, our inflation averaged 3.1% in the last decade. And when inflation reached 5.2% last year, it was a very heated or lively parang debate in the public and media. The fourth is the interest payments. Before, 4.2% is the equivalent amount of our GDP that we use to pay interest and principal for our debt or borrowings. Today, that has gone down to an average of 2.5%, meaning we free up money for social services and infrastructure. And the final one is international reserves, the dollars and the gold that we have in the central bank multiplied 10 times, making our economy very stable today. That is why we are able to withstand economic shocks around the world. And this is not an invented or only us that we see the result. The International Credit Rating Agency and the international market have already given us a positive nod by raising our credit rating to BBB+. What this means is that we are just one notch below the highest rating of A, the A level. What this means is the international community sees the Philippines as low risk and therefore can lend us at cheaper interest rates, meaning the government, instead of spending hard-earned taxpayers' money to pay interest payments, they can use that for more productive social services. It also means the business sector, when they borrow, can avail of lower interest rate. It also means that the individuals who borrow for a car loan or housing loan or personal loan can also see lower interest rates. So the basic idea here is that we are not getting an upgrade financially, we are also upgrading everyone's lives because this money borrowed can expand the business, create jobs, and bring people out of poverty. The second in the promise is tax reform. And we are doing this not to pay debts, unlike like before. It is to invest in our country's future. Everything we collect either goes to infrastructure, social services, or universal health care. One of the more important feature of the tax reform is that we gave 99.9% of taxpayers an income tax reduction by exempting the first 250,000 annual income and reducing the tax rates for everyone except those earning 8 million taxable income and above. So this call center agent, for instance, with a 21,000 monthly salary, used to pay 22,590 in taxes before train. Because of train, that person pays zero and brings home 22,590 in savings. If they are two in the family working, then they bring home almost 46,000. A lot of money that can be used for savings, education, travel, and that is fueling the economy. We gave in last year 111 billion worth of income tax cut, equivalent to a 14th month pay for the average taxpayer. On the other hand, we not only gave money, we raised tax revenues. We have achieved the 14.7% tax to GDP ratio in 2018, which we last saw almost 20 years ago. What that means is that we are able to raise funds to provide for the services needed by the people, and to improve our infrastructure. So 20 years ago, our tax effort was 14.7. It went down, up, and then finally we have recovered. So this is an important development. And because we are able to raise our own money, we are able to lower our overall debt burden. This slide shows that from as high as 80% of GDP, our debt has, as a share of our economy, has fallen to 45%, and it is on a downward trend. And interest payment used to be 5.3% of our GDP. It has now fallen to 2%. In the 2000s, 1/3 of the budget went to interest payment. Today, it is less than 15%. And where is this money going? This next chart shows you that the green, or interest payment, has been narrowing, and what is getting bigger is the blue, those that go to social services, and the yellow, those that go to economic services, notably infrastructure. And apart from giving money to taxpayers and raising money from consumption taxes, we also protected the poor through the following measures. Number one is an unconditional cash transfer to the poorest 50% of the population, which I will explain later the update when I discuss train. And then the second is Pantawid Pasada to the jeepney operators, so that the higher excise will not be passed on in terms of higher fare. And finally, the national ID, so that we can provide every Filipino an identity to open bank accounts and receive subsidy with least leakage. The third in the promise is ease of doing business, and the previous Congress passed the Ease of Doing Business Act. What this means is that if you have a simple application like a renewal of license, then it should take no more than 3 days. If you have complete documents and the government did not approve it, it is deemed approved. So what that means is the ordinary businessman, the SME or the micro enterprise, need not have to fall in line and waste time getting a license. He can go back to his office or business and make money. The next in the promise, number 4, is infrastructure spending. In 2018, we spent 889 billion peso on infrastructure, a combination of the big ticket ones and the small local infrastructure, even to the farthest, poorest areas. This is a fantastic improvement from 10 years ago when we had no money at all to improve our infrastructure. And this will continue in the next 3 years. And I think what is more important is the jobs that are created. Every 1 million peso in construction costs, 30% of that is typically labor, 300,000. And that is the average total salary and benefit of a skilled construction worker today. So 3 million jobs, to our estimate, have been created because of our infrastructure program. The fifth promise is rural development, and we are not yet completely done, but we have begun by giving rice farmers a rice competitiveness enhancement fund worth 60 billion for the next 6 years guaranteed, plus additional for them if tariff collection from rice exceeds 10 billion per year. And we are hoping that the implementation will be faster, so farmers feel the benefit faster. The seventh promise is human capital development, and the landmark law here is a first-class universal health care law, which we hope to implement in full starting next year. But we cannot do that if we do not raise the taxes on alcohol, tobacco, and other unhealthy products to fund universal health care. Just to give you some example of the benefit of universal health care, today 18 primary care drugs are provided free. Under universal health care, that will be increased to 120, including cancer drugs. Today, 7 health conditions like tuberculosis and pneumonia are largely provided free or highly subsidized. In the universal health care, if we have funds, then it will be unlimited, so long as you are a member of the PhilHealth. And finally, from up to 90% of copay for medicines, it will now be a fixed fee, basically your membership. If you are a taxpayer, you contribute part of your salary. If you are a poor or indigent person, you are subsidized by the government. And finally, the ninth in the promise that we achieved is social protection. We continue to grant the 4 Ps, and it is now law, so that it is institutionalized. We have a national ID, so that 70% of Filipinos that are unbanked will be provided bank accounts so that they can save and also get subsidies in a more targeted and less leakage will happen. So these are the achievements in the first 3 years. And what are the results? after all these reforms have been put in place. First is the GDP growth has been, I think, still in a very solid position, above 6% in the last 3 years, except for the early part of this year where the reenacted budget made the growth lower than 6%. But we hope to catch up in the following months. This is despite what President Trump says, the trade war, the Iran sanction, the higher interest rate, the oil price increase, problems in Turkey, Argentina, and the emerging problems between, let's say, Korea and Japan on trade issues. So this is a solid performance despite all those problems. The next achievement is, according to NEDA, by 2020, we will become high-income country, 2 years in advance compared to the 2022 target. And this is a great achievement because more than 30 years na tayo naghihintay as a low-middle income country. So finally, the Philippines has a higher footing in the global economic picture. And finally, poverty reduction is very encouraging. In 2015, the poverty rate in the first half was 27.6. And then in 2018, first half, it fell significantly to 21%. This fast reduction has never been seen, and we hope this will be sustained so that we achieve the 14% by 2022. And a big part of that reduction is due to the Rice Tarification Act, which I will call a rice liberalization, a very game-changing reform that is really, if properly implemented, going to benefit almost everyone. It is first pro-consumer because we are able to buy rice cheaper. Prior to rice tarification, our rice price is twice as high as the rice in Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam. Today, because of rice tarification, prices have gone down by around 10 peso per kilogram in many markets. The second is it is pro-farmer. We are giving farmer of rice 60 billion guaranteed and even more if we collect more from the tariff. And even the small farmers will benefit because 60% of farmers of rice plant 1 hectare or less. And while they earn money during harvest because of the price of rice, they will have to buy rice every other day of the year like everyone else to eat, and they are the ones suffering because of the high cost of rice. The third is it is pro-taxpayer because we have been subsidizing NFA, 140 billion over the years, and it is not necessarily achieving its objective. The fourth is pro-worker. Minimum wages continue to increase, but that doesn't mean the workers benefit. It is driven by high cost of living, particularly food. So as we bring down the price of rice and food, eventually we will benefit workers. The next is it is pro-children. 1 in 3 children are malnourished, and therefore they cannot finish school because of their lower cognitive skills, and they end up in a job that is not high paying, and they perpetuate that to their children and grandchildren. By feeding the children properly today, we can allow them to finish school and get a better job and transmit that benefit to their families. And the last one is it is pro-poor. NFA rice before the rice tarification is sold in the market where everyone can buy. The leakage was up to 46%, meaning bought by the non-poor. And sometimes in our survey, we find out that some rich people buy NFA rice to feed their pets because of lower quality. So all of these are examples of why this reform is game-changing. And we need to just implement them better so that the farmers, most especially, will see the benefit faster. So in summary, the objective of the next 3 years is to make all the yellow green and all the green greener. And Secretary Dominguez has 3 objectives for the next year to achieve that. To support that, the first is to achieve the upper middle income country status, and that is expected next year. Then we want to grow 7 to 8%. Then we want to bring down poverty to 14% as targeted. And how do we do this? Secretary Dominguez mentioned in the pre-SONA last July a 5 economic priority program. The first is to accelerate infrastructure from 5.1 to 7%. And that will allow us to achieve the 8% GDP growth. The second is to complete the 4 remaining major packages of the tax reform. Package 2 is on the corporate income tax and incentives. I think there. Package 2 plus is on alcohol and e-cigarette. I will give an update later on the development in the House. Package 3 is not necessarily a tax reform per se, it is a valuation reform. And Package 4 is the harmonization of various passive income and financial taxes. I will spend a little bit more time, Madam Chair, later. I will now move to the third priority, which is to open the economy to more foreign direct investment that will bring jobs, innovation, managerial skills, and opportunities. That would include the amendments of several bills that keep the economy close to FDI, such as the Public Service Act, which is a 1935 law, and the Retail Trade Liberalization, and the Foreign Investment Act, so that we allow more people and investors to come in to bring higher quality at lower price. The fourth priority is the improve the implementation of existing reforms such as the national ID, ease of doing business, universal health care, and so on. Unless these legislations are implemented well, then the people will not feel the full benefit. And finally, to improve the productivity of agriculture, including the distribution of individual titles to land reform beneficiary so that they will have ownership and they will be more secure to invest and improve productivity. So at this point, Madam Chair, this is the first part of my presentation to give everyone a picture of the reform agenda so that I can convince everyone that the tax reform is an important in funding this ambitious agenda. I can stop here, Madam Chair, if there are any questions before I proceed to the next presentation. Thank you.
Ahead and then feel free na lang if may add din kayo. Well, we've discussed some of this during our briefings, but just to put it on record, yeah, I like the 10-point socioeconomic agenda because it at least very visually. Can you just go back to it so everyone can see? Can very visually depict our our agenda. I think it was in that meeting with ASEC Lambino when we had this presentation, where we itemized the bills that DOF, NEDA, and the other departments would like Congress to work on to support this.
Yes.
And I found that I felt that we could still work on that some more. So maybe you can invite some of your colleagues in the other departments, and I can have another meeting, whether it's just informal or whatever, to do that because it goes directly into the agenda.
Okay.
So, for example, just to mention it, you know, when we talk about land management number 6, there's an important bill that doesn't seem to be on the agenda, which is the Land Administration and Reform Act. And it was top of mind when I was a new senator, but then it kind of disappeared. I think the international funding disappeared, so nawala yung lobby group. But I had the opportunity, Senator Bato, to go to Thailand, and then they did a pilot project in Leyte, wherein under one roof, one-stop shop, ang titling of lands. Unlike now, we hear these horror stories that lands are, they're duplicate titles being issued, there are these scams. So I think that's so vital, and I have not seen it on the agenda pa rin up to now. So there's just one example. Of course, you know, I'm all happy that number 10 is reproductive health law, and I'm also happy that we acknowledge that it's yellow, it's not a green, because it hasn't really been rolled out. But I'm hopeful, I'm confident that it will be prioritized, because at the end of the day, I think we fail to recognize that no matter how much we pour into social services, which is my area of concern and passion, if mothers are giving birth to 10 kids at a time, even I cannot afford that. Even General Bato cannot afford that. None of you here, sitting here, can probably give all your dreams and wishes for your child if you have 10, unless you're really a multi-billionaire. So that's just the reality. For the record, I never interfere with a couple's choice, but that's the reality. So if we sit in the hearing of DepEd and we sit in the hearing of another committee, the resources they have will never catch up with our birth rate. So that's and so you talk about alleviation of poverty, but that's the biggest thing. Now we talk about being high income country, and the distribution of wealth is always an issue, and the poorest of the poor are still having more children than they can even afford to feed. much less dream of going to college in the nearest college, which is probably 3 hours or 7 hours away. Anyway, so those are my, and they directly relate, USEC, to what you're trying to achieve, because the distribution of wealth will not be achieved if we don't look into the distribution of wealth. I mean, look into the inequalities and honestly, number 10. Number 7, human capital development. I'm still not aware, and again, I'm very happy that's here, but I'm not aware that we have a cluster even that's attending to the human capital resource management. So even in the city level and then regional levels, there's still a mismatch. Well, there's totally a mismatch in the resources available, the graduates, and the industries. So that's also something that I feel we can really work on, because again, all the visions that you have, for example, let me give you an example. Senator Bato's dream, since he was a general, for a peaceful country, including the president's dream, our dream, all of us, and ensuring that children are in school, that these kids are not on the street, yung batang kalye, batang langsangan, could be addressed if we had more social workers on the barangay level, no? Could be addressed if we had more guidance counselors and even more teachers. But I'm not aware that we have any human resource planning going on to address this. So the end result is like, what are we going to do with this batang kalye, mga batang adik, mga batang ginagamit ng sindikato? Wala tayong plano because wala tayong human resource management. And you'll hear from the professions, almost all the professions across the board, even our teachers, that they will be recruited by our neighboring countries who are able to pay them more and giving them a more stable job. So that will really eat into these visions and dreams that you're presenting to us. So I'd really like us to take a step back. If there are other colleagues of yours who can handle that part, kasi yun nga, you might be able to collect, but then it's going to go out to fill the gaps as opposed to going in the direction of making life better. It may just be, filling the gaps and not really being able to address it in the most efficient way. So we can go into that more details, but I really wanted that on record. Okay. Senator Bato, anything before he proceeds?
So far, so good.
Okay. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On your comments, I will bring it up to our regular economic development cluster meeting that is chaired by Secretary Dominguez. There is also a human development cluster of the cabinet, I think headed by the SWD. I shall also bring up the concern so that we can address and come back to you.
And what I'll also do on my part is my team and I will sit down on 1 to 10 and give you our recommendations, whether it's by way of existing bills that I've seen in both houses or bills that we feel will help you precisely plug that gap. So like when we're talking about human resource, that includes the feeding program that is now a law. No? So meron na yon. We just have to implement it. You'll have to source the funding for that. Things like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second part of my presentation will be an update on the TRAIN, or the tax reform for acceleration and inclusion. I will present the revenue collection that is attributed to TRAIN, followed by a quick update on the social mitigating measure, and USEC Antoinette Yonko will be updating us on the tax administration aspects of the reform. So let me first begin by saying that this is the first time we are doing a major tax reform after about 13 years. And so a lot of the things we present here are subject to improvements and learning as we go along, including our revenue targets and how we distribute the cash transfers and how we implement these reforms. We'd rather do it slowly but surely rather than rush and have a lot of leakage in general. So let me begin by first giving you the overall update on train revenues in 2018. And this was earlier presented in the House hearing last April or May. So this is nothing really new, but just to give everyone the perspective. In 2018, our data shows that we collected 68.4 billion peso from train in the first year. Our target was 63.3 billion peso. So in other words, we are 5.1 billion in excess and 8.1% above the target. In terms of the breakdown, based on the data we receive, the BIR exceeded target by 10.6 billion, while the BOC was below target by 5.5 billion. This does not necessarily mean the agency are not collecting. There are many factors that I will explain why these targets are, some are higher, some are lower, but in general, net is quite good because we exceeded the overall target. Now let me first discuss where we see the biggest gains. We have seen the biggest gains, meaning we collected above target in personal income tax, automobile excise, tobacco excise, and documentary stamp tax. So the total is 51.5 billion more. So more in addition. Our original estimate is that we will give 146.6 billion peso back to the people in the form of lower income tax. But actually, what we lost was actually 111.7 billion. And based on the data submitted and our economic analysis, it seems that it is due to better compliance because taxes are lower, people comply more, and there's an increase in registered taxpayer, and we are increasing them more because of the POGO workers, and an increase in jobs because of the infrastructure program. The second is we noticed that despite the higher automobile excise tax, there is excess target in the automobile excise by 6.2 billion due to higher purchasing power of imported vehicle. And I think in a hearing a few days ago on the EDSA provincial, the MMDA may have said, I heard, that it is due to increasing volume of cars on the road. So people seem to be able to afford still, despite raising the tax. And economic growth shows that people can afford. The next is tobacco excise tax. We are above target by 5.6 billion, thanks to significant improvement in compliance and enforcement by BIR and BOC, particularly after Mighty Tobacco was caught and now paying far more taxes than before. And finally, doc stamps, despite almost raising the rates by 50%, we are seeing above target collection by 4.7 because there are more transactions happening. The economy is growing, so more transactions in the stock market, in the debt market, and also better collection efficiency. On the other hand, we have seen the shortfalls in the sweetened beverage and VAT, and some of the reasons here are policy related and circumstantial. For instance, in sweetened beverage, we are short by 11.9 billion because the industry is not using any more high fructose corn syrup. Under train law, if you use high fructose corn syrup, you have to pay 12 peso per liter for your beverage. But if you use other than high fructose corn syrup, like artificial sweetener or regular sugar, you only pay 6. So what happened here was as early as January, there was a sudden shift from high fructose to regular sugar, and therefore the collection was below target. We always expected that the shift to happen, but we did not realize it was that fast. So the BIR did an audit, of course, as part of its job, and found out that the tanks of the beverage company, in fact, did not have high fructose corn syrup. They were re-exported. And we also requested the FDA, Yusek Eric heads also FDA, to check if they are have submitted applications. But I think in general, even with this slight shortfall, we have seen that the high sweetened beverage tax have been very effective. The next shortfall.
Before you go to the next, no?
Thank you. Yes, Madam Chair.
The difference between the rate for the high fructose corn syrup and the sugar is to protect our local sugar industry.
I believe that was the intention of
But
Congress.
is it the local sugar industry that's benefiting, or is it importation? Because you mentioned importation.
I think the local, in fact, wala nang local supply na adequate. I think the beverage company are clamoring for some importation of the
Okay.
regular sugar.
Because what I'd like to be sure that we are conscious of is that we are always looking at two situations. The industries that are affected, which in this case is the sugar planters and all the related the people and the industries that are rely on that. Of course, the whole economy of that region. but also the health effect. So sugar is not any better than high fructose.
Yes.
As far as I know, is there any doctor or scientist in the house? I'm a self-read nutrition addict advocate, and so I know that for a fact. And I know that your efforts to tax sugar beverages. In fact, you don't call it high fructose beverages. You call it sweeteners. Sugar is on the top of the list. So we need to address that. Again, I made it very clear that we are conscious of the industry itself. But if you're telling me that we're talking about importation, there should be a difference, because the exception to the rule is we're trying to help an industry, which is our own people. But that should not extend to importation, because between sugar and fructose, there's no difference. I'm not aware. In fact, there's a lot of debates on whether things like honey are even better. There are those who don't believe that they're any better anyway. So, and even the sweeteners. And I think you did mention sweeteners, but I think the contribution of that is so small pa. There's just a very small population who will sacrifice the natural sweetness that you get from sugar and high fructose corn syrup than you get from stevia or the rest. So can we address that? Thank you.
Just to also give an update, we are working with the WHO and USEC Eric of DOH to begin an evaluation of the sweetened beverage, its impact on consumption and on health. So we are beginning, and we can report it once the study is complete.
What I haven't really seen in your presentation, and these are presentations I usually see maybe later on in the details, now when we talk about tobacco, when we talk about alcohol, maybe that's where the figures will come out. But the social cost, so the loss of income if there are sicknesses, if there are deaths in the family from all of these products that are not good for our health. And I'm generalizing that because the 6% may feel heavy, but at the end of the day, the health risk, diabetes is, you can confirm that, I'm sure, Yusek, no, all over the world, and the Philippines is not an exception. Diabetes is the cancer of today and the future. If you want to say a few words, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Madam Chair, that actually after tobacco and alcohol, sugar right now is the third biggest risk factor for health problems. No? So we're really on that right track. We want to tax tobacco, alcohol, and then the sugary drinks. And this is usually something that habits that are set during childhood. That's why we want to keep the sugary drinks out of children's hands.
On record now, and I'll go into more details later on, I still feel though that our efforts on the part of DOH can be improved in terms of health promotion, because it's not solely a tax initiative. It should really be a holistic approach. And I mean, I don't watch cartoons. I don't watch. I mean, I have a young child, but I don't get the chance to really sit down and watch the commercials that pop up, even during the family time. But I'm not really aware. Nothing has caught my mind on infomercials and things to that effect. No, if I'm just not aware, I would like to be enlightened. But that's precisely why we put health promotions as part of Syntax. So maybe we can have a separate discussion on that, solely focus on that, so that we can also push that effort further. And on that note, I even mentioned that in the health hearing for dengue, yung ating mga infomercials. Thank you.
If I may, Madam Chair, continue, we also have seen some shortfall in the VAT. The VAT shortfall compared to the original target is 31.5 billion. But a lot of this is due to the circumstances around the reduction of importation. Just to give the Madam Chair and Senator Bato a backgrounder, in the train law, we removed 54 non-essential VAT exemptions. 54. And what that means is, used to be itong mga non-essential are not paying VAT, but under the train law, they should pay VAT. And a lot of them are on importation. But in 2018, only 8 out of the 54 that were affected by the removal of the exemption reported importation and thus had to pay VAT. So there are two possible explanations. One is they front-loaded already their importation in 2017, of course, to avoid the VAT. And the other reason is they decided to maybe buy local or defer their importation. So we will compare with this year to see if that is still the trend. We are also open to revising these targets to show the trend because we are learning from this experience. The next is, however, because we gave back 111 billion to the people in the form of lower income tax, a lot of that is going to be spent kasi 90% of income is spent, only 10% is saved, but we hope that can be improved. So we are estimating second, third, and succeeding round effect, which means that our VAT revenue coming from the multiplier effect is going to lower that gap by around 19.9 billion. There's also the overall trend that the VAT collection in the BIR is falling, and one reason for that is because there are more importation, which means these importations are deducted from the gross VAT, meaning kasi they are claimed as input VAT. So this also means that we are temporarily seeing this decline because of the capital importation, but once these investments materialize, we expect our collection on the VAT to significantly increase. So in summary, this is a table that shows the details, which again was presented a few months ago in the House and in our press release. But the general story here is that there are some up, some down, and we are learning from that and revising the estimates. But the overall story is that from a target of 63.3 billion, we collected on the net 68.4 billion, meaning we are 5.1 billion above target or 8% above target. And we will continue to monitor the collection and adjust as needed to reflect the learnings of last year. The next three slides basically give an update of the social protection programs that were legislated as part of TRAIN. So again, to recap, we have the unconditional cash transfer, the Pantawid Pasada program, and the social welfare program through the national ID. Let me focus on the first two. In terms of the Pantawid Pasada, we have already given, as of July, 108,270 jeepney operators and drivers their Pantawid Pasada card, worth 5,000 last year, and this year the projected amount is 20,000. So the main idea here is to offset the increase in the excise tax, so that instead of raising the fare, they can keep the fare, so the government subsidize and help the poor. This is below the 173,000 target because many have not the claim because of the lack of documentation. Kasi yung ang gustong is i-make sure ng DOTR and LTFRB ang mabibigyan lang ay hindi colorum. And finally, on the unconditional cash transfer for 2018, we have distributed 9.2 million, really those in the very difficult to reach areas and those whose maybe the elderly cannot go to the centers to claim the cash. So we are working very hard and hopefully with the national ID to improve the distribution of these cash transfer. So Madam Chair, at this point, okay.
Yusek, what was the solution that you were just mentioning about the conditional cash transfer? Like, you recognize, no, that there's an issue because that's exactly what I remembered when you said it. So I was asking her that we had reports that some of the conditional cash transfer would reach them after a few months. So it really became a burden, and then they would borrow money with that as collateral, and so what would go to them would be a fraction already. So it's kind of really pathetic.
There are some problems with the distribution, particularly those in the farthest areas. in fact, sometimes to reach the bayan, it will cost more. So we decided na hindi every month yung pagbigay ng cash transfer lump sum para iwasan yung transportation cost. Some of the poorest kasi are really in the mountains, in the JIDA area, so the geographically isolated and disadvantageous areas, JIDA, that is a term of the SWD. Some are in islands na mas mahal pa mag-rent ng boat. So the long-term solution here, in the short term, this is really the challenge, kaya mabagal. And we don't want to rush kasi minsan may reports of na hostage or nawawala yung pera. In the long term really is to fast track the national ID to give everyone an account and i-download na lang sa kanilang account. That would be our mode of delivery in the future.
Wala pa rin silang madadownloadan dun sa bundok.
One option that we are exploring, but we are just having a discussion with COA, is the mobile or GCash
Yeah.
approach.
I don't have the solution either, so
Mm-mm.
I'm just,
Apa.
acknowledging that it is a problem. But maybe we can, put that into context. Like, how many are we talking about of the number of beneficiaries? How many are really in those situations? Are we talking about 1%, 2%, 3%? So that we don't also get lost in the details. We want to address it, but at least we would know 97% are accounted for, and ideally receiving it regularly, because the reality of the 5/6 will kick in.
Thank you, ma'am. Let me convey that to the DSWD. But more or less, mga 8% lang as of this point are the extremely hard to reach. I will request them for more data. Ma'am, at this point, I'd like to turn over to Yusek Antoinette Yongko for the report on the tax administration updates of TRAIN. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I will present to you today the updates on the administration of the train law. First of all, we will discuss with you the status of how we're implementing it. So we will go through revenue regulations, the fuel marking, the VAT refund provisions of the train law, and the e-invoicing and receipting and e-sales reporting. Okay. So first, we'd like to inform the committee that the BIR has issued 24 regulations to implement the train law. As you're aware, the topics are very varied, so there had to be separate regulations per topic, some of which we worked on even prior to the passing of the law. So we have here the tax on mineral products, excise tax, donors tax. It's quite a lot, so it's separate regulations. So 24 regulations all in all. And all of the regulations were passed and completed by the BIR on time for them to implement it and for them to be able to collect the proper taxes. Okay, the next one is the fuel marking. Now, the train law mandated fuel marking for all petroleum products. It was required there. So what the DOF did together with the BIR and customs was actually to procure. It took as you can see, the procurement was quite prolonged and tedious process, but we managed to do it already. So the mandate in the train law was actually mandatory marking of gasoline, diesel, and kerosene after taxes and duties have been paid. And then there would also have to be random field testing and confirmatory tests. So this is the status of that. So as of July 2019, the BIR and the BOC already issued a joint circular on how it will be implemented. As you may be aware, this is something new again in the Philippines, fuel marking on a nationwide basis. There were some tests before, many years ago in Subic, but apparently it didn't work out. So again, this is a new thing that we are implementing. So in July 2019, the BOC already drafted their guidelines. And there have been inspections going on, consultancies with various parties, and also, visitations in the refineries and the depots. As you're aware, it's quite a different setting for each. So how do you do the marking? It's very technical. We had all these engineers to do it. So, but just to let you know, we already had our first official marking activity last August too. So we've already done it manually, and over the next few months, it will be on a nationwide basis already. So that's where we are on fuel marking. So it will be fully implemented by the end of this year, as mandated by the law. The next one is also mandated by the law, which is on VAT refunds. So the mandate really is an enhanced VAT system that grants refunds within 90 days from application, and the payment in cash by December 31, 2019 of all pending VAT refund claims filed as of December 2017. So by this year, there shouldn't be any backlog anymore on the VAT refunds. I will show you the numbers of the VAT refunds and how we're doing. Okay, the VAT refunds filed before the train law, there were a total of 2,136 pending VAT refund claims as of January 1, 2018. Now, as of July 31, we haven't 100% paid for it yet, but from 2,136, after 1 year and a half, we're down to 188 claims. So we're hopeful that in the next month or so, this 188 will be cleared before the December 31 deadline of paying all the backlog on refunds. So that's where we are right now on that VAT refund thing. Okay, you have here the details on where the claims are still pending. So what office it is. Okay. No, I'm just showing it because the commissioner's here. So 188 more to go of refunds to process. Okay, the next one, please. Okay. We're also glad to inform the Chair that the BIR successfully processed all VAT refund claims filed in 2018 within 90 days from application. So we're working on that right now, and hopefully that will be the trigger for the removal of the zero rating on indirect VAT, VAT on indirect exporters. So that will be the trigger. So 90 days is really the threshold provided by the law. Okay, there is one more thing that we're working on, and it is really this, e-invoicing and e-receipting. Now, the law says that we have to implement this within 5 years from the passage of the law, from the train law. So what is this? This is issuance of electronic invoices and sales receipts and submission of the electronic sales reports to the BIR system. So it will be an automatic reporting. So once the e-invoice is issued, it goes to the BIR right away. So the sales are recorded at the BIR level right away. So that is what we want. And we are looking to other countries in implementing this. So where are we there? We're working to have, hopefully the funding for this will already be coming through. And we're working on a pilot project for this. So this will be in the next, since we already got authority to obtain the funding, then hopefully this pilot project for this will already be immediately starting. So what will this do? Once we have e-receipting and e-invoicing, it will flow into the tax refund process directly. So refunds can be obtained quickly. So it's like one seamless, that's our dream, to have one seamless process. From the time you do a purchase and then you get an receipt or e-invoice, it goes to the BIR system. And then if you happen to be an exporter, you need to get a refund, then it's already all there in the system already. So it should be quicker. That is the ultimate goal for the BIR on this process, on e-receipting and invoicing. So we've gotten the SPA from Malacanang to proceed with getting the funding for this. So we're working on it this year and the next few years. It's not going to be fast, we know, because it'll be hard because there's so many factors. But we will do it. What did the Secretary say? 2022? 2022. So basically, that's basically it for the implementation provisions of the train law that the BR and the BOC are working on. Thank you.
Madam Chair, before I go to the next presentation, which is an overview of the remaining packages of the tax reform, would there be any question on the status of train at this point?
For me, not at this point. Senator Bato, proceed lang.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair, Senator Bato. A while ago, I presented the overall story of the Philippines and the reform agenda.
If I may, I would suggest that you give these kind of updates to the public also. Same way, by way of infomercials, infographics, so that they understand. I did a random post on Instagram to ask, I don't know, I just assume my followers on Instagram are much younger than me, if they knew what was the tax rate of somebody who was earning 22,000 a month. And I think 80% plus got it right naman. So, baka puro BPO, ano yung mga... I don't know, but, so that's nice, diba? But they were still, there. I gave them options. I said 0 tax, 10,000 pesos. I just invented some numbers, and 80 plus naman got it correct. But I think that would be very important because, they're saving now, prior to train, they're saving 22,000 a year, diba? And then, what can they buy with 22,000? They can buy their mother a beautiful thank you gift. They can feed, they can host more sumptuous meals for their family. A lot of these young graduates are also contributing to their family, diba? So I think you should really do that so people are aware. Para imbis na problema si Senator Bato sa mga nare-recruit sa NPA, natutuwa sila. Hindi nga. Natutuwa yung mga bata na their 22,000 additional income is for them to spend as opposed to them not knowing what benefits the government is providing for them, di ba? So infomercials yun para aware talaga sila and where those tax collections are going and the gaps that you're able to fill, BIR, BOC collections.
Thank you, ma'am. That's very good advice. In fact, I want to share and
Dapat
market.
may Instagram account na bang DOF?
We have Twitter and our Facebook. And our Facebook is, actually, I want to advertise now. Department of Finance, Facebook.
advertise mo
If you
na.
have a phone, go to Facebook now, please. Look at Department of Finance and like it. We are number 3 in the most popular among government offices. Apo. Pwede po. That's a good idea, sir. In fact, ma'am, one of our posts, exactly what you advise is with the savings, what is the suggested menu of things you can buy? So you can find it also. So lahat po ba nakapunta na sa Department of Finance Facebook? I-like nyo lang para you can receive updates twice a day. We update with the latest. And we try to explain po, ma'am, the benefits of train and to explain also what are the provisions and how to address the concerns of stakeholders. For more technical materials, you can go to our Department of Finance website, dof.gov.ph, where we post all the presentations, including today's presentation. So you can read it yourself. Now, ma'am, if... okay.
To check if they know what's the tax rate. You can put a quiz there. Tapos, pag tama yung sagot mo, may parang, ano ba tawag doon? Confetti.
Okay,
Kung
sige,
gusto mo,
ma'am.
magpapremyo ka. Announce ko, may papremyo si Yusek Carl.
I will have to check kung may reward money tayo sa BIR or
Sagot
BOC.
na ni Senator Bato yun kasi mas konti ang sasali sa NPA pagka
okay.
nakita nila yung benefits. So sagot niya na yun. Kunin niyo na
Okay.
sa budget niya.
Thank you, Senator Bato. Oh, we look forward to that. Ma'am, if I may proceed now, my last presentation is to give the committee and stakeholders an overview of the remaining packages of the comprehensive tax reform program. I had to start a while ago with the overall story of the Philippines and our reform agenda so that everyone realize that nothing is free. Many people feel that someone from heaven just drops money to fund the social services and the infrastructure, but it's really not that. And some other people think that we can just borrow, but borrowing is basically asking your grandchildren and your children to pay the interest payment and the tax. So now I want to give you the overall picture of the tax reform, and hopefully you may understand, everyone, why we have to do this. Our tax reform is an investment in the future. This is the first time we're doing a tax reform where there is no crisis. Yung tax reform dati kasi, sagot yan sa isang crisis, tulad ng VAT reform in 2004. Pangalawa po, we are not asking, or we are not receiving any calls from the World Bank or the IMF telling the Secretary of Finance to raise money to pay debts, which was common in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. In fact, we don't need to do a tax reform if we are happy with the business as usual. The business as usual is that people in this room, the middle class and up, will continue to progress, but the bigger part of our population will remain poor. So that is why we build this tax reform as an investment in our future, where all money goes to infrastructure. In the case of train, 70% infra, 30% to social services. And in the case of the tobacco and alcohol and sweetened beverage, almost all will go to universal health care. One of the main concern of stakeholder, and being asked repeatedly in hearings and in the media, is why don't the BIR and the BOC just improve collection efficiency? I think to their credit, they are doing a lot already, but that is not enough. We have to balance that with improvements in tax policy, because the problem is in the law. How can the BIR, for instance, collect if, number one, we do not index taxes to inflation? An example po is in 1996 po, I started driving. I pay 10 peso per liter for gasoline. I remember that because it came from my allowance, of which 4 peso and 35 cent was the excise tax on gasoline. In 2017, after 20 years, I have work, I have savings, I pay 40 peso per liter for gasoline, but I still paid 4 peso and 35 cents for my excise. So, ibig sabihin, over time, lumiliit yung collection when you compare that to the expenditure needs of the government. That's why we need to adjust the taxes.
Question. The example you gave, did you say you were a student?
I was a student 1997,
So
college.
10, you said 10 pesos
10
yun
pesos,
per
yes.
liter.
And of which 4 peso and 35 was the tax, the excise.
Were you already conscious of it at that time? The 4 pesos and 35
I so
was the
happened to be
tax?
conscious. I was interested in these topics.
Okay, that's the first thing I wanted to establish. Ilan ka lang sa mundong ito na conscious sa ganon,
Okay,
no?
yes.
But the fact na conscious ka, my question is, ilan kaya ang estudyante at magulang pa or whoever who are conscious? I would say very little, because even Yusek Barba is shaking his head. I have to admit.
Baka yung driver po
Hindi
nag-feel.
hindi rin ako conscious noon. So again, I go back to your
To the
infographics,
infographic,
your
yes.
infomercial,
Okay.
so that they know, 'di ba? Every time na they pass through a nice road, they will remember you.
Yes,
Sadly,
okay.
every time it's a bad road, they will also remember you. But
Thank you,
know,
ma'am.
that's the challenge there.
Yes.
Can I segue a little bit, just because I remembered it now, and I don't know if there's a better time, no? When you were asking if we had any questions. Actually, this is directed to DTI, so I guess it's you, Roel, who will answer my question. When we talk about distribution of wealth, a lot of growth opportunities do happen in the middle class, right? Because I know there's this general principle or belief that if you have a strong middle class, it would usually translate into a strong economy, because these are those who were able to go to school, have access to capital, right? Can borrow, etc., etc. So on that note, I happen to be aware, because I now am a mother of that generation, students graduating and professionals, etc. And so many of them are interested in online businesses. And I happen to come across this discussion just through my phone, through a group of friends who are saying that there's still a lot that we can do to make doing business online easier. So that I just want to pose that question to you, and we can have this discussion separately. But just because it's the middle class and that's where the growth potential is, I wanted to be sure that we're conscious of it, because the fact that you can run your business in your house is already to me, a mind-blowing opportunity, because you don't have to rent, you depending on the business, but for some of them, it's a one-man show. They don't have to hire too many people to at least launch that business. So if you make it difficult for them, and I was reminded because of your presentation on all the online transactions that you're planning, and I was saying, I wonder if that's trickling down in other aspects, not just for purposes of payment, but in all other aspects, because one of the concerns I have, which we'll be discussing with USEC, is the FDA. Historically, I've always been monitoring DFA and FDA, and it's really an agency that has so much potential, because people need medicines, and as universal healthcare is now will be covering more and more, we need to churn out our registrations. I think nakapeg pa rin sa similar to, if you remember the rate of was it what, say, I don't even remember what you were, was it VAT that you were was it the VAT rate that you were mentioning in your
In my example, the
Yeah.
excise tax.
Oh, the excise tax. Ako naman, memorize ko yung license to operate fee na binabayaran ng multi-billionaire na pharmaceuticals. It's like 1,000 plus pesos, which is pathetic. And every time they register a product, whether it's something that will save a life, like something for diabetes or heart, or some sexual performing drug, it's like a pathetic 1,000, 2,000 peso to register that product, and they earn millions by the day. So this is also something that you should look at, because I know that DOF frowns upon earmarking, but FDA can't even improve their services because their fees have been perpetually pegged to that amount also, which I became familiar with when I was first out of law school and was practicing administrative law with the FDA. I don't know if there were minor adjustments, but has it been? Do you know?
Yeah, well, no, Madam Chair, the last adjustment I think was about 10 years ago. We're planning to adjust our rates in January of 2020. And most of the income of the FDA actually goes to the trust fund of FDA so that it can upgrade its services. But right now, what we're trying to do is just take care of all the backlogs first so that our clients don't complain na ang bagal-bagal tas magtataas ng rates, no?
Ay,
So
naku, hindi. But I don't buy that. These multimillionaire clients of yours
Yeah.
are paying 1,000, 2,000 pesos. I know your service is really bad, because it really is bad. But really, I mean, those rates were like panahon pa ng hapon.
Yeah, but we're adjusting at start of 2020.
Patingin ha.
Yes.
Kasi every time I would talk to a director general and I'm talking about 3 or 4 or 5 past director generals, I was like, are you lobbying for the pharmaceuticals, because they're complaining about the rates, and the rate was like in the 4 digits. And they're one brand, one capsule, one particular medicine would sell in the millions yata per day. So parang, I'm not excusing bad service, but really, I would always be so shocked that would be the concern of the Director General, na magugulat daw yung mga ano. So baka you need more like the tax collectors working with them, because I was just really continued to be aghast that would be their concern. And now that you're trying to go online, FDA has not really moved forward, no? So anyway, don't get me started, because I know, and I am I'm bothered by the performance of FDA. Okay, let's just proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Another example, yung alcohol and excise on tobacco, they are pegged at a rate of, let's say, 30 peso per pack. So, kailangan natin i-adjust gradually. Kasi kung hindi po i-adjust, when the income of people increase, they can afford, then over time, those tax rates not adjusted will mean lower revenues. The second problem is we have so many exemptions and special treatments. So how can the BIR and BOC collect if the exemptions keep multiplying? And to be honest, we have four kinds of them, which I called FIES, F-I-E-S. The first are the freebies, then the incentives, then the exemptions, and then the subsidies. In fact, half of the economy somehow is not taxed, and they are not necessarily the poor ones. They are those receiving some form of incentives, which I will discuss later. And finally, is we have this absolute bank secrecy. Even a criminal case cannot be even if there's a criminal case, the BIR cannot open bank accounts. And two countries in the world, Lebanon and Philippines, have that absolute bank secrecy. So we are proposing that we have to at least amend when there is a fraud case.
I have a proposal for you, Yusek.
Mm-mm.
We are the only until about 3 years ago,
Mhm.
as of 3 years ago, it was only the Philippines and Malta that did not have a divorce law. Pumasa na sa Malta. So pag pumasa na rin yan sa Lebanon, let's pass a divorce law and then we will lift the bank secrecy. Sabay natin gawin yon. Okay?
That is a good package.
I mean, seriously, pareho yung situation na yon, di ba?
Yeah.
Why should we be proud that we're the only country that doesn't have these kind of
Okay.
laws?
Thank you, ma'am. And then the husband and wife can open each other's bank accounts to check and settle the case. Going forward, thank you, ma'am, for the suggestion. We have the highest tax rates in the region, the highest VAT rate, the highest corporate income tax rate, the highest personal income tax rate, but a very narrow base because we don't tax half of the people, even if they have to be taxed because of their income level. So the people feel that we have a tax system characterized by inequity, complexity, and inefficiency. So the proposal of the Duterte government is a comprehensive tax reform program of the following packages. Package 1A is TRAIN, that was passed in 2017 and implemented since last year. Package 1B is a tax amnesty on estate and delinquency tax, which was implemented early a few months ago, last month. And then there is also Package 2 Plus on the tobacco excise, which the President signed 2 weeks ago. So what are remaining are Package 2 on the corporate income tax and incentives, Package 2 Plus on alcohol and e-cigarette, Package 3 on property valuation, Package 4 on passive income, and finally, if we have time in the coming year, we would consider the motor vehicle user tax, the general amnesty, but we want the lifting of bank secrecy for fraud cases and automatic exchange of information as the carrot and stick equivalent, and then we look at finally the mining tax regime. So these are what the Department of Finance would like to propose to the Committee on Ways and Means to consider in the next, I think Secretary said 15 to 18 months.
Just curious, is the priority based on the amount of revenue that would be generated?
That's a good question. In the case of Package 2, it is based on the urgent need to remove uncertainty which investors are feeling today because they do not want to invest until there is a final incentives package. In the case of the alcohol and e-cigarette, the urgency there is to fund universal health care, which if hindi po mapasa this year, means universal healthcare in 2020 is very much underfunded. So right now, if you will allow me to highlight the main principles behind each package, the details can be found in our website. On Package 2, the Committee on Ways and Means in the House approved it yesterday, and it is now going to be presented to the plenary, I was told, starting next week. And Package 2 is really about the corporate income tax and incentives reform. In Train 1,
Sorry,
we...
Yusek,
Mhm.
can I just put this on record? Can you consider for Package 2 revisiting the sugar? Because if we're already in the importing stage, then that is no benefit to the local industry, and it is detrimental to the health of the Filipinos, and it is not contributing to universal health care.
Okay. In Package 2 Plus on the alcohol
Yeah.
and e-cigarette, I think we can, because
Can
it
you
is
please?
health
Because
related.
Obviously, we know our constitution requires that it starts with the House, so I can text my brother.
Okay, thank
But
you.
let's be formal about it, and maybe you can propose that. Thank you.
Okay, may I work with your technical team on the details then? Thank you. So if I may continue, the main problem in the corporate income tax sector is that we have the highest rate in the region, 30%, and this applies whether you are foreign or domestic corporation, or whether you are large, medium, small, or micro. And the corporate code, I believe, recently amended allow one-person corporation. So this will affect everyone, including anyone here which wants to start a business in and corporatize. The problem with our highest rate is that we don't really collect much. So Thailand has a 20% tax rate but collects 4% of GDP on a 20% tax rate. So ang efficiency is high, 20%. Meanwhile, the Philippines with the highest rate only is able to collect 3.7% of GDP. So our efficiency is low. The main reason for this is despite having the highest rate, we exempt so many sectors. So our base is so narrow and we are thus unable to collect. So the solution we propose in the CITIRA bill, meaning Corporate Income Tax and Incentives Reform Act, which Congressman Salceda is sponsoring next week, would be to gradually lower the corporate income tax rate from 30 to 20%. We cannot do this immediately because of the huge revenue impact. Kasi every 2% reduction is 52 billion loss. So we have many other needs, so we will do this gradually. But what is good about this is that our estimate shows that 1.4 million jobs can be created. Why? Because instead of paying the high tax rate, they are going to pay lower, and the savings they can use to invest and expand and create jobs. So we are very certain about this outcome, especially since our economy is doing very well. Now, on the other hand, we have a very complicated incentive system. There are 4 complications. The first is we are the only country in the region and also in the world that when giving incentives are granted forever. So after the 4 to 8 years income tax holiday, ibig sabihin po, zero tax, they can avail of the 5% GIE or gross income tax in lieu of all taxes, national and local, except the real property tax, forever without anything in return. So you will see that most countries have a limit. The second problem is we have 13 IPAs or investment promotion agencies like Subic, Clark, PEZA, BOI. All of them grant incentives, but the DOF, tasked to raise 4.1 trillion for the budget next year, has no say in 11 out of the 13 IPAs. And even in FIVIDEC and PEZA, where we are a member, we are only one voice out of 11 or 13 board member. In other countries, the Minister of Finance has a say in the grant of incentives because that is hard-earned money that has to be accounted by the hard-earned money of the taxpayers that needs to be accounted. Next is we have a total of 342 special laws in the country today granting incentives. So you can imagine how many groups get incentive. Many of them are, I think, well-meaning. But when you put them all together from the Department of Finance point of view, wala na pong pondong matitira sa dami ng incentives binibigay. So we are requesting Congress to begin to reprioritize where should the money really go. The other problem we have is sa dami ng incentives, those who should not avail of incentives will pretend to be beneficiaries. May I just use an example? Senior citizen VAT exemption. We all know that it can be misused when a senior citizen's VAT exemption is used by a child or a grandchild to buy medicine or to avail of Jollibee or restaurant free food. These are the problems that make BIR and BOC difficult to collect, and it is not their fault. It is the problem of our policy system.
If I may, that's another opportunity for infographics.
Yes.
I think I read somewhere that people who come from a history of poverty tend to, if given the chance to eat a lot, even though you're already earning well, lalamon ng parang it's their last meal because they come from a background of poverty, no? Like the Filipinos, no, we're very particular about ubusin lahat ng nasa plato mo. Ganun din ako pinalaki ng tatay ko. So because they grew up in the time of war, no? So ganun yon. So I mentioned this because it's in our psyche yata na makalamang, wag kahit na yung lumalamang ka na, hindi nila naiisip na pag lumamang ka, meron kang nadedehado na iba. So your infomercial could tell them that every time you try to cheat and have your senior citizen discount, no, be used by somebody who's not a senior citizen, you deprive somebody else or magsasara yung malit na karinderya ngayon dahil lahat na kayo naging senior citizen na. I think that's very, very important because it goes into our psyche on why we think that way. Kasi gusto mo kalamang because that's the history. I mean, I read studies like that. That's why, because I always try to understand. Mababait naman ang Pilipino. I mean, Filipinos are also known na kupkupin hanggang kamag-anak ng kamag-anak ng kamag-anak ng kamag-anak. Diba? Pati nga anak ng asawang, hindi na nga niya anak, iniwan na siya ng babae na. Pati yung anak nun, kukupkupin niya. So mabait tayo, and yet, gusto natin man lamang. So I think you have to address that.
Thank you, ma'am, for the advice. So I just want to make a statement that we are not saying that the exemption or the VAT exemption or discount should be removed. What we are saying lang po is that whenever we have an exemption, it can be abused. So we have to look into this together. And finally, we have 549 eco zones and free ports.
I'd like to take this opportunity. I will just tell you later on off the record my
Okay.
examples because
Okay.
it is not my intention to look down upon anyone advocating for, like you said, no, anyone advocating for special treatment or exemptions for any particular group. No, like in my case, I try to look after and advocate for the rights of PWDs, women, IPs, etc. No, but there are other groups, and for the 24 senators you'll probably have 24 different advocacies.
Yes.
But I want to precisely, I join you. We need to rationalize it because if you look at the bills files both in the Senate and in Congress, kanya-kanyang alaga ng sector yon. And where do you draw the line? I cannot say that my advocacy is better than yours, diba? That would not be fair. And that's why I won't mention here what those particular groups are. But ang dami nating ganyan, not just in incentives to businesses, but in the allocation of funds across the board. And I need to tell you that it continues to happen even in Congress. So if you want to go back to your 10-point agenda, you'll have to be able to clearly explain to all sectors concerned that this is how we'll be able to reach the most vulnerable.
If, with your permission, it's a very good statement that we would like to quote, if possible. Okay, co-share. Thank you, ma'am. And then finally, we have 549 eco zones and free ports. Each of them is a tax-free zone kasi they are by definition separate customs territory. This is where most of the leakage are coming from. So we have to find a way to rationalize. And all of this problem is giving us tremendous fiscal costs. In 2017, 989,000 firms are registered from micro to large. However, 441 billion peso was granted in just 1 year to 3,150 firms who asked for incentives. So this is a very big amount, yung 441 billion. That is 2.8% of the GDP, or almost as big as the fiscal deficit of the country. In addition, we estimate 63 billion peso may have been abused or lost due to transfer pricing. Let me give an example po. If a firm has a subsidiary that receives incentives like the zero tax and a subsidiary that pays the regular tax, in the subsidiary na zero tax, useless ang deductions kasi whatever you spend, you cannot deduct it kasi you get zero. So there's a tendency to pad the deduction in, for instance, the regular firm. Therefore, liliit po yung taxable income and the tax. And that is where the 63 billion might be coming from. And total po, we are giving away or are possibly wasting 504 billion in just 1 year. So we are not saying that all of them should be removed. What we are saying is the huge amount of money requires us to reprioritize and understand which sector should be given incentives and to be supported and which should already be phased out. Otherwise, we will continue to incur a lot of costs and cannot fund the priorities of the government. That is why we propose package 2 so that we have a more fair and accountable tax incentive system. Without going to the details, they basically boil down into 4 principles. The first is performance-based. When we give an incentive, it's not something for free. There must be jobs and exports that should be created and accounted na hindi lamang parang afterthought. Dapat we are monitoring that regularly. The second is targeted. We should give incentives to the sectors with the most positive impact to the economy, or give more incentives to the poorer provinces so that they can develop. The third is time-bound. We want to avoid or remove the forever incentives. Let them apply every 5 to 7 years, and if they qualify, they can have more years. Pero yung forever kasi is like babying or giving allowance to your children. That does not necessarily make them better. Then finally, transparent. We want the incentives and the recipients and their benefit and cost to be known, kasi if I ask an incentive, someone is paying for that. So yan lang po yung principle na pinaglalaban namin in package 2 or the CITIRA bill. Finally, I would like to present package 2 plus on alcohol and cigarette. And just to give an update, ma'am.
Before you go there, no, for the benefit of everyone, especially my colleagues and their representatives here, if we, which I feel we will, finish the overview today,
Yes.
then we will go through each of these packages in separate hearings. Again, I'm repeating that DOF is available for one-on-one because these are technical things that even my team and I are having weekly briefings. So baka sabihin niyo, mabilis ako mag-absorb. Hindi ako ganun kabilis mag-absorb. Pero mga pangatlong beses ko na ito narinig. So just to put that out there. And then what I wanted to be sure that you include when you dissect this later on, particularly for package 2, because I'm sure you would imagine that there would already be groups going to me for sure as the chair, and even to other members. When you refer to the performance-based, let's make it very clear what the Philippine vision is. Because as far as that particular company is concerned, they're probably performing in whatever way they feel is within their goals, right? So you need to be able to share that vision with them and maybe give them time to adjust. You know, I mean, who knows? They may have at their fingertips or without much effort, they may have access to technology that would then align it with our goals. So I'm just saying that, you know, those are the kind of concerns that we would hear. So we just have to make it known to them and give them that window to adjust. You know, if they just love it here so much, at the end of the day, some of these investors just love the life in the Philippines. Will be realistic in terms of recognizing if there have been any investments that have been made in the immediate past. And also, like you said, the reason why it's urgent is so that they can start investing, because lahat sila nag-aantay, di ba? Yeah, that's it. So just so that prepared ka na for that, because even in my hearing, I will invite all of those who want to present to me to attend, so that they can hear first what you have to say before me sitting down and trying to address their needs, when that's not really, that's really for you to do, and then I just sit here and listen to all those options.
Madam Chair,
Yes, please.
pwede makasingit. Yusek, meron kang, ano bang incentives na binibigyan natin sa mga Chinese? Bakit ang dami ng Chinese na nagdatingan dito? Meron ba tayong mga tax incentives na binigay sa kanila?
Yung mga Chinese po na nagtatrabaho po sa Pogo, yung Philippine
yung Pogo.
Outbound Gaming, meron po silang kasi incentive yung corporation na 5% tax lang. Yung regular tax natin ay 30%. So doon po sila pumapasok. Yan po ang gagawin natin kasama sa pag-review natin, pag-determine kung ano po yung sector na kailangan bigyan ng incentive. So kasama po siya sa review natin po.
Salamat.
Thank you.
Yo.
The chair, we can continue. Okay, thank you. So I want to propose to the senator and the chair that before the next hearing on package 2, we can have technical briefings to any senator that may be interested, and we will have a more detailed discussion of the salient provisions. Now I want to proceed to package 2 plus. This is on alcohol and cigarette excise tax. The status of the bill in the House is that the alcohol and the e-cigarette in one bill was approved on second reading last night and will be put for third reading, I understand, this Tuesday. And that also means it will be transmitted to the Senate possibly in 2 weeks' time. And I will present the salient provisions of the bill. On alcohol and tobacco, the main purpose are the following. First is to ensure that the universal healthcare is properly funded. Kasi sayang po yung first-class universal healthcare law na pinasa kung walang pondo. Ibig sabihin, hindi po mai-implement ng tama. Yung pangalawa po is to basically discourage the consumption of these unhealthy items, yung alcohol products, yung cigarette, and yung sweetened beverage. And then the third is to ensure that we have a healthy, global, and competitive workforce that will not spend their hard-earned income on their health care later on. Prior to the enactment of Republic Act 11346, we had a 257 billion requirement for universal health care in 2020. That is the number you see above the red. What we can guarantee, more or less, is around 195 billion. That would give us a gap of 62 billion, and that would need to be funded. And where are we getting the funds for this? You will see here that 15.5 billion is going to be provided by Republic Act 11346, or the law that mandates the higher excise tax on cigarette products. And yung yellow na 36.5 billion is where we hope to get from the DOF and DOH proposal to increase the alcohol and e-cigarette taxes. And that will give us a much smaller gap na red of 10 billion, which is still there but more manageable. So that is where we are hoping to get the funding. Now, under Republic Act 11346, the price, or the tax rather, of each pack of cigarette will increase from 35 pesos to 45 pesos per pack in 2020 and gradually increasing in the next few years. Also, there is a provision that raises the tax on heated tobacco products from to 10 pesos in the Republic Act, but in the DOH and DOF proposal and what the House bill approved yesterday, it was increased to 45 pesos to align with the regular cigarette, because it doesn't matter if you smoke heated or burned cigarette, they have the same effect. So we are glad that the House increased it to 45 for next year. And for vapor products, the Republic Act has a 10 peso per milliliter tax on the vapor products like the Juul. What the House approved is to increase it to 30 pesos per milliliter. The DOF-DOH proposal is 45 peso per milliliter. So the 30 peso that they approve is not bad. It is actually a good start kasi it increases it from 10 to 30. And taking e-cigarettes are not necessarily more beneficial. They also have some level of harm that we need to internalize. Madam Chair, when you were...
Sorry, yeah. Okay, go ahead. I was going to ask you to go back to something.
Yes,
Yeah.
the status of the bill on alcohol and e-cigarette was that it was passed on second reading by the House last night, and it will be on third reading next week, and it might probably be transmitted to the Senate the week after. So mga end of August, the Senate might receive the bill already. And right now, I am at the midst of explaining po the rates that were approved. If I may continue, ma'am, or do I go back pa? May I go back na lang?
Funding gap. Yeah, so how much is this funding gap on slide page 65? 20, ano yan? 20, ayan, 23?
Okay, if I may go back.
I want to go back further.
Yes, in slide 64,
Yeah.
hello, the universal health care requires 257 billion for 2020 as envisioned in the law, and there is a budget of 195 that can potentially be made available. So the gap po, ma'am, is the 62 billion
hold
in
on.
red.
On that note, Yusek, would you be the one, I won't ask the question now, I just want to know who to reach in DOH on the details of this funding requirement? Kayo,
Yes, Madam
kayo
Chair.
yon.
Apo.
Okay, so if we have time later, but if not, we can just sit down. Because I also wanted to be very clear on being realistic with the expectations of of the Filipinos of what to expect, no? Because even in the most developed countries, you'd always see there's still I'm talking about, because my father had the liver transplant, no? So I'm
Yes.
talking about ailments like that where you'll still see people doing individual fundraising, because even not aware that even the richest government in the world is not able to cover all these kind of uh, conditions. So, yun lang gusto ko balikan kasi dapat realistic yung yung binibigay natin na information sa
Yeah,
tao.
because
Okay.
all of everything naman will be limited. But I think the Madam Chair, our primary goal yung for that gap is really just to enroll everybody, especially
So
those who
that,
cannot
that
pay for
amount that we're
themselves.
referring to is for enrollment.
Most of it will actually go to enrollment. Yung
Okay.
gap natin will be to enroll people.
And then with those figures, we need to be clear about
The
what does it
packages,
cover?
yes.
What are those packages?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. To proceed, in slide 65, we are going to get part of that gap from the Republic Act 11346, or the tobacco excise tax recently signed by the President. That is the 15.5 billion in green. And we are hoping that the Senate will consider the DOF and DOH proposal to further increase alcohol and e-cigarette tax, and that will give us 36.5 billion. So yung gap na matitira, yung red na 10 billion, is more manageable.
I didn't catch that part, we were chatting. Ba't naging 10 na lang yon?
Okay, because yung 62 billion na original
ngayon yung
gap,
kakapasa lang. Okay.
yung kakapasa na 15.5 na President signed, and then that is the tobacco, and then yung yellow na 36.5, that is possibly coming from the alcohol. Although we are requesting the Senate to consider the higher rates kasi the House passed slightly lower.
Okay.
And then kaya po yung gap na red is smaller.
Okay.
So to proceed, ma'am, the Republic Act 11346 raised the excise tax on regular cigarette per pack from 35 to 45 pesos starting next year. So this is something that is quite good, so that it addresses our health and revenue objectives. In the next slide, the Republic Act also imposes a 10 peso per pack of heated tobacco product tax, which we find to be very low. So fortunately, the House in House Bill 1026 approved yesterday raised it to 45 peso per pack, because a heated tobacco product is basically the same as a burned or tobacco product and should not be taxed differently. So that is a good sign. And then for vapor products, the e-cigarette like Juul, the House approved an increase from 10 peso per milliliter to 30 pesos per milliliter. That is the red bar you see at the right. The DOF proposal is a higher 45 pesos per milliliter, which we would present to the Senate for consideration, a higher rate. Now, to put together those heated tobacco products, HTP, and
Sorry, before you leave, no? Just so that I'm up to speed. So itong figure mo, go back please. Yeah, that one. So this is up to date. House Bill 1026.
yes, that was the approval last night. So the increase from 10 peso to 30 pesos for the vapor products, na nicotine or salt nic. But the DOF proposal is a blue one, which is a bit higher. May I proceed, ma'am?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I'm just trying to. Yeah, let's proceed.
Thank you, ma'am. I would.
Before you go to, after vapor, you're already going to a next topic na ba?
Yes, after vapor, I would like just to present the revenue
So
estimate.
before you go there, I wasn't in the Senate when the excise tax on cigarettes was passed. I was in the House. And if you recall, I was proposing for higher tax rates.
Yes.
So my question is, I know that I'm pretty sure, although I haven't seen it per se, but there were at least 2 bills in the Senate on higher tax rates. And I'm almost certain there would be similar in the House. So would you know is this going to be revisited at another time? I'm just curious.
For the regular cigarette, no more. So we have already set the path from 45 peso per pack next year towards 60. So we would no longer raise the regular cigarette. What we are proposing to raise are the e-cigarettes because the revenue, next slide, is quite low. So we are proposing to increase the rates.
Do you have a slide that shows the consumption? Because I just studied on my own worldwide that there's an increase on the consumptions because of the feeling or maybe the marketing that it's a safer product. So do you actually have numbers in like for Filipinos? Although it's more prohibitive, no? To shift to e-cigs and DOH has. But I mean, offhand, is it like 10% of the market, 5% of the, not even? It's very small.
Very small.
It's probably just the market that I see because
Yes.
I'm from Taguig, so
Yes.
that's what you would see. And DOH, do we have regulations already on the use?
On the vapes, we
Yeah.
have an administrative order that's now in force. It was signed a month ago. But we also have pending bills in the House and Senate on the regulation of yung vapes. Kasi we only have right now regulation of tobacco use, yung sigarilyo.
Okay.
And we want to have strict regulation
But-
also the use
But
of
if
vapes.
you already have findings, if there's proof that it is detrimental to the health, huwag nyo naman antayin kasi yung 3
Yes,
years na ihihiring namin yun, baka may mamatay na sa amin.
Yes, Madam Chair, we already are enforcing the ones sa AO. Meron lang kaming konting legal challenges recently, but we're pushing through with
Sige,
it and regulate them.
Update us na lang because
Yes, ma'am.
I really feel that DOH can be more proactive than it's been in the previous administration. I'm just
Yeah.
referring to now because we have a president who when he was still the mayor, acknowledged the harmful effects of tobacco and I'm sure he would support it. So kindly be proactive about it.
Yes, our
So that I
regulation
can
now.
focus on taxation and not have to worry about working on a bill pa on that. I can breathe clean air, please.
Yes, we want to prohibit it in the
Otherwise, makakloud
kung
yung
saan bawal
judgment ko.
manigarilyo.
Carl. Bahala ka na dyan kasi ako pagagawa niyan. So, okay. My message has been delivered, okay?
Ma'am, we'll just submit the data, but there's a survey that shows 226,000 Filipinos smoke vape. Wala pa tong 1% kasi the number of smokers are in the 20 million plus. So maliit pa lang yung vapes ngayon. We will submit the data.
But on that note, I just want to put on record that that's still 226,000
Yes.
lives, right?
Correct.
So, ako, mag-aabala pa rin ako dyan because these are lives that still matters and these are productive young people who are most likely making that shift and I
Yes.
want to be sure that they're also addressed. If that will take a little bit more of our time, then
Yes.
then we should also include them.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. If I may just end my presentation in 5 minutes with the update on the alcohol excise tax, given the time constraint. The House yesterday passed the following for fermented liquors like beer. So the DOF wanted to raise from 25 peso per liter to 40 pesos per liter. That is the blue bar. What the House passed yesterday, HB 1026, is to raise it from 25 peso per liter to 32 pesos per liter. And instead of a 5 peso increase every year, it is a minimal increase of 2 pesos per liter every year. So that is the House approved version for fermented products like beer. Next, On excise tax on distilled spirits, the hard liquor like brandy, rum, whiskey, gin, tequila, and so on, the DOF wanted to raise the specific rate from 23 to 40 peso per proof liter. What that means is it is adjusted to the level of the alcohol. However, the House passed one that has a rate increasing from 23 to 35 pesos per proof liter. So this is also lower than the DOF proposal. And finally, on the ad valorem component, because distilled spirits get taxed twice, one on the price and one on the level of alcohol, we propose to increase the ad valorem rate from 20 to 25%, but the House only increased from 20 to 22%. So there are also commensurate increases in the wine, mga 10% per year, although the wine market is extremely small, 1% lang. 70% is beer, 29% are the distilled or hard liquor. So the final slide, beer, yes, 29% is the distilled spirits and 1% is wine. By wine, I mean yung hindi rice wine, yung mga imported grape wines. My last slide basically is to compare the revenue estimate between the DOF and DOH proposal and the House bill that was passed yesterday. So in general, in the first year, if you look at the alcohol line, the DOF-DOH proposal is 33.3 billion, but the House approved alcohol taxes that would raise only 16.6 billion in the first year. If we combine the tobacco, the alcohol, and e-cigarette, the DOF proposal with the DOH would raise 52 billion in the first year compared to the House, which would only raise 33.3 billion. So I think the House gave us a good start, and we are hoping in the Senate hearing to give some evidence to the Senate to further increase the rates. At this point, ma'am, I propose to stop my presentation. There are two more, package 3 and 4, but I think given the time and the attention, maybe we can have it for the next meeting. What I propose, if you agree, is to show you an example of our infomercial that we are using to show the public the benefits of train. That would be a way to close my presentation.
Before we go there, I do still have questions.
Yes, ma'am, of course. Thank you.
On
Sorry.
alcohol. For the record, this was not touched upon by the Senate, right? Last,
There was one hearing, and that was it.
but I mean, the Senate did not pass, no?
No pass.
Because
Yes.
I know the House did.
Yes, the House
Okay.
did, and the House basically passed the same thing.
The same thing.
Yes.
Okay. So I want DOH well, what I'm about to discuss involves DOH. Well, most of my interventions include DOH because I accepted the chairmanship of this committee. So yeah, tama, Carl, kumain ka muna. I accepted the chairmanship of the Committee on Ways and Means precisely to be able to see through the delivery of public services that I've always dedicated my time and my energy on. So I personally was surprised when I came across the different so I started studying the different types of alcoholic beverages. No, I'm not a drinker. I'm there in the 1% that barely matters. So wag na tayo mag-tax ng wine dahil yun lang yung iniinom ko. Off the record, that's just a joke. So I'm not familiar, I'm not familiar with it as a consumer, the industry. But what surprised me when I was getting updates is that there's now a product called Alcopop. I did not know about it, and the closest that I can think, and again, I will refer to my old friend, young friend, Yusek Barba, yung panahon natin, yan yung mga kali, yung mga medyo sweetened, what do you call them? But I remember it was the first product that came, yeah, Shanti, mga ganon. It's the first product that kind of catered to a younger generation, which is bad. That was bad if you think about it, kasi it makes it more palatable if you're not used to the strong taste of alcohol. Anyway, so I have here the examples of, survey lang. Who, like me, was unfamiliar with Alcopop? Raise your hand. Oh. Tamo? So I will educate you today, okay? Actually, dapat, sorry, but just for the sake of our discussion, kasi the media is here and Yusek Domingo is over there, so medyo stiff neck sila sa kakaano. Can you find the room somewhere here in the middle because you're part of this discussion? Okay. And I actually didn't get a chance to say if Yusek raised his hand eh. Kasi nga, mas stiff neck ako niyan eh. So I will ask the question again so at least I can see if Yusek is familiar with it. Okay. So while he is transporting himself here, I will ask the question again. So who of you, like me, were not familiar with what an Alcopop is? Because here it is. Oh, pati ikaw, Carla, talaga. Okay. Okay. So guys, this is an Alcopop, okay? Alcopop, okay? And hindi guys, balik. Okay, for the record, baka kasi, di ko alam kung dahil batang titingin o lasing, pero baliktaran pala siya. Oh, baliktaran siya. Don't ask me why. Kaya akala nung staff ko na nakakakita sa likod, baliktad yung hawak ko. Hindi, kasi pag binaliktad mo, mababasa mo pa rin. Anyway, so let me try to read it. And why don't I give you your own copy? Kaya mo sumalo? Okay. So it says here, ready to drink, so wala kang nang gagawin, iinumin mo na lang. And it says gas cocktails, ready to drink cocktails. 14 proof, 7% alcohol by volume. So 7%. So by way lang of comparison, again, this is not my industry, so I don't know it. How much percent is beer?
Around 5.
5. So mas malakas to sa beer, ha? So ako, I can barely drink a bottle of beer. Mga half lang ako. Nakikiinom lang ako sa friends ko. 7% to. So mas malakas yung tama nito kaysa sa beer, okay? Now, honestly, who would be attracted to this packaging? A senior citizen who can choose to do what he wants to do with his life or a child? Mestro pa siya. Okay, nabawal sa hearing ko. Okay, and now this is the thing I want to tell you. Do you know that this is distributed in grocery stores? And guess what? Some of the supermarkets I've been to have a section for alcoholic beverages. This one is beside the juice for kids. Okay? Oh, well, for some nga, nasa alcohol, sa iba, nasa katabi ng ano. And it is easily available in convenience stores, in groceries, and hindi hinihinga ng ID. Pagbayad, wala. So that's why I go back to the funding and the registration fees of FDA, because one of the perennial problems that FDA had was enough inspectors to close down, because you can close them down. So yung mga supermarket na nagbebenta nito, papauwiin ko na ng maaga si Yusek para masabihan niya yung mga taga-FDA na puntahan na yung mga grocery, mga supermarket, mga convenience store, because you should not be selling this to minors. And online. It's available online. Okay? So that's why I was very bothered when I found out about it. Where was that other packaging? I gave it to you. No, but tingnan mo naman yung color, pink. 'Di ba? Strawberry. And it's stronger than beer. So anyway, I'm very bothered about it, and it's really something that you need. A lot of these things you can act on without our intervention, but if there are gaps here, honestly, I will prioritize it. Okay? Thank you. Tapos nakalagay sa kanya, 18 plus for adults only, pero nandun siya sa part na natutupi. So, hindi mo na siguro makita. And really, I mean, it's not a matter of having that label there. It's a matter of accessibility, right? So, yeah. Sadly nga, buti nga kung 18 years old pang magkaka-interest dito Nakakatakot nga baka, I mean, what if a parent doesn't know? I know very well, many busy mothers, kaladkad nila yung mga batang anak nila, katabi to ng juice So, anyway, very bothersome. Any quick comment, Yusek? Then we can move on.
Yeah, no, Madam Chair. Actually, when Yusek Carl told me about this last week, I asked FDA immediately. No, these are actual. I found out they were actually registered products, and we had no regulation on labeling or on the sale, yung kung saan ilalagay sa part ng grocery about it. So we are working on that, and in fact, the only thing that they were required to put is on not for sale for minors. So these are actually registered products, and it's very bothersome that the products have evolved, but our regulation hasn't evolved. So it's time really for us to take a look at
I'm
this.
glad that you did an audit on your regulations, but this is where mananawagan ako sa mga matitino at maaayos na businessman na siguro naman sarili nyong anak, hindi nyo pa iinom yan, di ba? Whether sari-sari store, grocery store, siguro naman hindi nyo kailangan antayin yung idadirect ko na lang pala doon. Hindi kailangan antayin na may ilabas na regulations ang DOH and ang FDA for us to know that children should not be drinking a product that is meant to be sold for adults that has 7% alcohol, higher than beer. So, wag nyo na sanang antayin yung regulations. We'll attend to that. I asked you to do that ASAP and we will also do our part. Pero, ano naman yon? Responsible business ownership naman yun. I'm sure I can find a case on unethical business behavior and so on and so forth if you try to sell alcoholic products to a minor, even by way of packaging. Okay, let's proceed. So you wanted to show a slide. So before you go to that, just for the record, you have package 3, which is the property valuation reform, and what's the last one?
Package 4 is the passive income and financial intermediary taxes, or the PIFITA.
And I've actually received a briefing on this, and since I'm the only one here, then we can
Yes.
postpone this for a
Yes,
later
ma'am.
time. But again, I'll reiterate sa colleagues ko, sa mga staff na nandito, magpa-briefing kayo because they're more than willing to have the briefings. Okay, you may show us now your
Right now, ma'am, if
commercial.
you allow, we will show you an example of our infomercial so that people will also see the benefits of that train. Thank you. Ma'am, that is the one of our infomercials. So we will cut this into smaller pieces for the Facebook. But this is an example of what we're doing. We'll also do that for the other packages to communicate to the stakeholders the benefits. Thank you. For now, ma'am, that's it. I think we can have the package 3 and 4 another day. But the priorities right now are package 2 on the incentives and package 2 plus on the alcohol and excise on e-cigarettes. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So, plus possibly sugar.
I will
Addressing that.
work with the team to come up with a proposal.
Okay. So today's hearing is suspended. Thank you very much to DOAF and to everyone else who attended. I hope that you don't feel that your presence was not valued, because I can never anticipate who of my colleagues would be attending, and sometimes they would have questions that would refer to your departments. But I leave it up to Yusek Carl's best judgment. We'll be having a few more, so to the extent that you feel that they're necessary, by all means go ahead. And if not, we can always just call them for those for my colleagues who may have specific concerns that are still related to train. So you can figure it out, because I feel bad, no, if you spent your whole afternoon here. But thank you for spending the time. Thank you.